The Plane Part 2. The unmarked Cessna's hum vibrated through the floorboards, a low thrum against the rising tension in the cabin. Four figures, clad in muted tactical gear, sat strapped into their seats, the air thick with the scent of aviation fuel and anticipation. Perez, his late 40s face a map of countless missions, cleared his throat, the sound a sharp crack in the confined space. "Welcome, men." His gaze swept across Morgan, a hulking silhouette of muscle and beard, then Taylor, lean and focused, and finally Sadu, her dark eyes sharp, unwavering. "We're here for a special mission. Intelligence picked up a signal. They found it." Morgan shifted, a slight creak of his harness. "The missing aircraft," Perez continued, his voice dropping, each word deliberate. "Gone for 5 years. It carried special cargo. We're here to retrieve it. We'll touch down in about an hour." He paused, letting the information settle. "Any questions?" Sedu's hand rose, a quick, precise movement. "Do we know what kind of cargo we're retrieving?" Perez offered a non-committal shrug. "We don't. We'll see when we get there." He leaned back, his eyes closing for a brief moment, a silent command for the others to do the same. The plane droned on, carrying them towards an unknown buried secret. The Cessna's wheels kissed the tarmac of a small, isolated airport, the sudden bump jolting them from their uneasy rest. Outside, the air was warm, thick with the scent of distant pine and damp earth. As the four agents descended the steps, a lone figure, crisp in a pressed uniform, stood waiting, flanked by 2 armed soldiers. "Welcome, gentlemen and lady." The officer's voice was clipped, efficient. "I trust your flight was pleasant. If you'll follow me, we have a helicopter waiting." They fell into step behind him, the soldiers maintaining a watchful distance. 2 military choppers, rotors already spinning a slow, impatient circle, dominated the small landing pad. The thudding rhythm grew louder with each step, a powerful heartbeat against the island's quiet. 30 minutes later, the choppers descended over a dense, emerald canopy, the rotors whipping the air into a frenzy. Below, a small, hastily cleared landing strip appeared, carved into the jungle, leading to a cluster of stark, functional barracks. The officer gestured towards the utilitarian structures as they landed. "This is the Special Research Center. Professor Nakahama awaits us in his lab." The helicopter blades whined to a halt, the sudden silence heavy. They disembarked, the ground firm under their boots, and strode towards the largest barrack, its drab exterior belying the secrets within. The air inside was cool, sterile, smelling faintly of antiseptic and something metallic. Professor Nakahama, a man whose lab coat seemed to swallow him whole, peered over the rim of his spectacles as they entered a small, cluttered room. "Welcome, gentlemen and lady. Please come forward." His voice was reedy, almost a whisper. The 4 agents formed a loose semicircle. The officer, after a brief nod, slipped out, leaving them alone with the professor. Perez's gaze hardened. "We received a briefing, Professor," Perez began, his voice flat. "The missing plane, found at the bottom of the ocean. Our orders are to retrieve the missing cargo." Yes, the missing cargo." Nakahama's eyes, magnified by his glasses, seemed to hold a flicker of something unreadable. "Please, follow me." He led them through a narrow corridor, the silence broken only by their footsteps, until they reached a heavy steel door. It hissed open, revealing a small, isolated chamber. their eyes immediately fixed on the center of the room. A yellow cylinder, dull and unassuming, rested on a cold metal table. Next to it, a form lay shrouded under a stark white sheet. A collective breath hitched in the room. "Did your superiors inform you what happened with that plane?" Nakahama's voice was barely audible. Perez's eyes, wide with dawning horror, swiveled from the sheet to the professor. "Number, they gave us no information at all, only that it was found." Nakahama sighed, a long, weary sound. "The passenger plane. It carried 2 of these cylinders." He gestured vaguely at the yellow container. "They were filled with a liquid gas, a deadly substance. We called it thallium X4, or, in hushed whispers, the Angel of Death. During the flight, a faulty valve, one of the cylinders began to leak. His gaze drifted to the covered form. If this gas, if it comes into contact with oxygen, it becomes lethal. It kills everything alive in that moment." Sedu's eyes widened, a dawning recognition. "Oh my God, I've heard about this. A top-secret weapon. It was scrapped, wasn't it?" "Too unstable." Her voice, usually calm, held a tremor. Morgan, however, remained fixated on the covered body, his brow furrowed. "But what about the body next to the cylinder, Professor?" Nakahama looked at Morgan, a deep, unsettling silence settling between them. He paused, a long, drawn-out moment before speaking again. "This body, it was in contact with the gas. I will show you all the results of this toxic gas." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. A chill permeated the room, colder than the air conditioning. They emerged from the professor's lab, ushered into a decontamination chamber where pristine white hazard suits, bulky and stifling, hung waiting. Each agent donned their suit, the thick fabric a barrier against the unknown, the gas masks clicking into place, their breathing now a muffled mechanical sound. "Ready?" Perez's voice, distorted by the mask, was barely a whisper. They re-entered the isolated room, the professor already inside, standing beside the metal table. The air, despite the suits, felt heavy, charged with a horrifying anticipation. Nakahama reached out, his gloved hand pulling back the white sheet with a slow, deliberate motion. A collective gasp, muffled by their masks, escaped them. It wasn't a corpse in the traditional sense. Its skin, a sickly greenish-gray, was stretched taut over contorted bones. Eyes, milky and vacant, stared up at the ceiling. Limbs twisted at unnatural angles, a grotesque mockery of human form. It was a disabled zombie, lying inert, yet radiating a palpable aura of wrongness. "Jesus Christ," Sedu's voice, raw with revulsion, pierced the silence. "It's disgusting." Perez, Morgan, and Taylor moved closer, their gazes fixed on the abomination. Taylor's voice was tight, a struggle against the rising nausea. This was a passenger from the airplane?" Nakahama simply nodded, his eyes, visible through the mask's visor, confirming their worst fears. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic hiss of their own breathing. The implications of what they saw began to sink in, a cold dread seeping into their bones. This wasn't just about retrieving cargo, it was about confronting a nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, they retreated from the chamber. The zombies' vacant stare burned into their minds. Sedu, however, remained behind. Her expertise was crucial. She moved with a chemist's precision, examining the yellow cylinder, her gloved fingers tracing the faulty valve. then carefully collecting samples from the inert zombie, a grim determination etched on her face. Perez, Morgan, and Taylor followed the professor to an adjacent viewing room, separated from the chamber by a thick pane of reinforced glass. They watched Sadu through the window, her silhouette busy and methodical within the contained space. Suddenly, Morgan's voice tore through the comms, a raw, desperate shout. "Sadu, look out, behind you!" But the chamber was soundproof. Sadu, focused on her task, didn't hear him. The men pressed against the glass, banging on it, shouting unheard warnings. The zombie, previously still, had stirred. A small shift on the table, a tremor, had been enough. Its milky eyes, now disturbingly alert, flickered upwards, then slowly, sickeningly, turned to look behind it. Sadu spun, her head snapping up. Her eyes widened, a flash of pure terror, as she saw the reanimated horror directly behind her. Without hesitation, she snatched a heavy hammer from the workbench. A sickening crack echoed faintly, even through the glass, as she brought it down on the zombie's head. The creature staggered, a low gurgle escaping its throat, and crumpled to the floor, momentarily stunned. Perez and Morgan didn't hesitate. They burst through the chamber door, adrenaline surging. Perez grabbed a discarded metal pole, Morgan a heavy wrench. They rushed towards Sadu, using their makeshift weapons to keep the thrashing, gurgling zombie at bay, its limbs flailing wildly even as it lay on the ground. Sadu scrambled away from the immediate danger, her breath coming in ragged gasps. But during the chaotic struggle, Morgan's flailing arm caught the metal table. The yellow cylinder, already precariously balanced, wobbled. Time seemed to slow. It toppled, a slow-motion nightmare, hitting the ground with a dull thud. The faulty valve, already compromised, burst open. A sickly green gas hissed out, thick and rapidly expanding. The pressure was immense. The cylinder, now a deadly projectile, shot across the floor, ricocheting off a wall and smashing through the reinforced glass window, separating the chamber from the viewing room. It flew, a blur of yellow and green, straight into the adjacent room. Perez, Morgan, and Sadu watched in horror as it struck Professor Nakahama squarely in the chest. He gasped, a choked sound, and collapsed, motionless, a grotesque puppet with its strings cut. The green gas, now unleashed, billowed violently into the viewing room, rapidly filling the space. All four agents, still in their hazard suits, watched in paralyzed horror as the mist swirled around them. In the midst of the chaos, the outside door to the viewing room swung open. The officer and his two guards, drawn by the commotion, strode in, their faces etched with concern. "Don't come near," Sadu screamed, her voice a desperate, muffled cry through her mask. "The gas is escaping. Shut the door quickly." But it was too late. The officer and his guards, caught off guard, inhaled deeply. Their eyes widened, their bodies convulsed. They stumbled back, gasping, hands clawing at their throats. The officer, a silent scream contorting his face, struggled to reach his comms, to sound an alarm, but his legs gave out. He collapsed, twitching on the ground, his body already beginning to contort. His guards followed, their movements becoming increasingly spastic before they too fell silent. The thick emerald toxin, now unimpeded, streamed out of the open door, a creeping tide across the terrain outside the barracks. From other structures, curious soldiers and chemists emerged, drawn by the sudden, acrid scent. They stumbled, gasped, and then, one by one, collapsed, their bodies seizing, their skin taking on that same sickly greenish hue. This plane cargo, once a mere retrieval mission, had become a living nightmare. 7 people lay dead or dying, their bodies already beginning the horrifying transformation, victims of the escaping X4 gas. Perez and Morgan, their faces grim, managed to slam and lock the chamber door, trapping the original zombie inside. Seydu and Taylor, their eyes wide with shock, stumbled out of the main barrack building, the green mist already swirling around the corners. They waited, their hearts pounding, for Perez and Morgan to emerge. Perez, his helmeted head shaking in disbelief, finally stumbled out, followed by Morgan. "What in the hell happened?" His voice was a raw croak. "Where's the professor?" Taylor, his face pale, gestured back towards the building. "He's dead. That cylinder. It hit him on the head." Perez looked back at the barrack building, his gaze sweeping over the fallen soldiers and scientists now littering the ground, their forms already beginning to twist. The thick green gas still churning from the building made the air shimmer. A cold, hard realization slammed into him. They had to move. "Now, we have to get to higher ground," Perez shouted, his voice echoing in the helmets. "The gas is still spreading." Still encased in their cumbersome hazard suits, the 4 agents began to run, their heavy boots thudding on the dirt. A few other soldiers, still alive, were running towards the danger zone, their faces contorted with confusion. Seydu, her voice straining, tried to shout a warning, but they were too far, too focused on the source of the spreading green mist. A female scientist, her own face pale with dread, stumbled towards them from a nearby research tent, her eyes wide. What happened? Seydu, her words tumbling out, quickly recounted the horrifying events. The scientist listened, her face draining of color with each word. This is what happened inside the missing aircraft," she whispered, her voice trembling. A cylinder burst open in the cargo hold. The gas seeped into the passenger cabin. They were doomed. If the gas touches you, or if you inhale the X4, your body turns into a lifeless corpse. This chemical weapon, it was tested on apes, other animals, even kidnapped homeless people. But the thallium X4, it was too unstable. Perez stared at the scientist, his mind struggling to process the implications. "So, they'll turn into bloody freaking zombies?" "Where did the plane crash?" Morgan demanded, his hand already on the holster of his sidearm. The scientist's eyes darted around, fear mingling with a chilling resignation. "It crashed in the ocean near this island. A special recovery mission was conducted after we found it. One of the 2 X4 cylinders on board, it was still intact until now." A guttural, awful scream ripped through the air from the direction of the spreading green mist. More scientists and soldiers, those who hadn't succumbed, were now stumbling back, their faces contorted with terror. "They're alive!" one shrieked, his voice raw. "The dead are alive! They're attacking us!" The remaining soldiers, those not yet consumed by the gas, opened fire, the sharp cracks of rifle shots echoing through the jungle. From the swirling green mist, grotesque figures emerged, shambling and moaning, their forms indistinct in the haze. One soldier, caught off guard, was tackled by a lurching figure, his screams abruptly cut short. Others rushed blindly towards the relative safety of their barracks cabins, slamming doors shut. "We have to get out of here," Perez bellowed, his voice laced with urgency. More of the shambling creatures, their forms becoming clearer, were pouring out of the green mist, their movements jerky, unnatural. They descended upon the fallen soldiers, tearing at their flesh with sickening wet sounds. "Don't go near the mist," one of the surviving scientists screamed, her voice hoarse with terror. "It's dangerous." The mist, a living, malevolent entity, grew thicker by the minute, consuming the landscape. Taylor's voice, tight with renewed purpose, cut through the comms. "We have to make contact with the base. Inform them of the situation." "Go find a communication center quickly," Perez ordered, his gaze sweeping the chaotic scene. The remaining survivors, a dwindling number, struggled against the living dead creatures now swarming the island. Soldiers fired, their shots echoing against the guttural moans of the zombies. A fire broke out, a barrack structure erupting in flames, sending plumes of black smoke curling into the green mist. Some zombies caught in the inferno burned, their shrieks inhuman, while others, seemingly impervious, shambled through the flames. Perez, Morgan, Sedu, and the female scientist huddled behind a sturdy army vehicle, its metal frame offering scant protection. They needed a plan. Taylor, his fingers flying, worked frantically at a portable comms unit, trying to establish a connection with the mainland authorities. "Mainland, this is Taylor. We have a code black. Repeat, code black. Chemical release. Casualties are reanimating. We're under attack." His voice was strained, breathless. He quickly briefed them on the rapidly deteriorating situation on the island, the words tumbling out in a desperate torrent. A deafening boom ripped through the air, shaking the very ground beneath them. One of the barracks, a storage facility filled with fuel and ammunition, had exploded. A searing fireball consumed the structure, sending debris and bodies flying. Some soldiers and personnel caught in the blast were instantly vaporized. Others, closer to the edge, were thrown violently, their forms broken. A few zombies, those caught in the immediate vicinity, were blasted to pieces, their grotesque limbs scattered. But others further away simply kept walking, their shambling forms silhouetted against the inferno. Morgan, his eyes scanning the chaos, spotted a machine gun clutched in the dead hands of a fallen soldier. He scrambled over, wrenching it free, and immediately opened fire, a steady rat-a-tat-tat ripping into the remaining zombies. Perez, his gaze sharp, found a fire axe, its blade glinting in the flickering light. Sedu, her face grim, wielded a heavy metal pipe while the scientist gripped a sturdy wooden pole. They swung, grunted, and struck, fighting off the encroaching horrors. "We have to get out of here by helicopter," Morgan shouted over the din, the machine gun spitting fire. Perez, still swinging the axe, decapitating a lurching zombie, yelled back, "Taylor is our pilot. He must get us back to the mainland ASAP." Minutes stretched into an eternity. Taylor, miraculously, managed to secure one of the military helicopters, its rotors beginning to spin. "I've got it!" he screamed, his voice raw. Perez and Morgan, still holding back the relentless tide of zombies, shouted for Sedu and the scientist to board. They scrambled into the chopper, their movements clumsy in the hazard suits. "Quickly, start the engine, Taylor!" Perez roared, his voice desperate. The blades, already turning, began to pick up speed, a growing roar filling the air. "We're ready!" Taylor shouted from the cockpit, his face grimly determined. Perez and Morgan, seeing their chance, sprinted towards the chopper, diving inside just as it lifted off the ground. One last zombie, its clawed hand reaching, managed to grab hold of the landing skid, its dead weight momentarily pulling the helicopter down. But the chopper gained altitude, and the creature, its grip failing, fell, a broken heap, onto the ground below. The 5 survivors, battered but alive, were airborne, leaving the Nightmare Island behind. The green mist, a shroud of death, spread below them, and from the depths of the jungle, the guttural moans of the reanimated dead echoed, a chilling symphony of horror.